Welcome to The Human Code, the podcast where technology meets humanity, and the future is shaped by the leaders and innovators of today. I'm your host, Don Finley, inviting you on a journey through the fascinating world of tech, leadership, and personal growth. Here, we delve into the stories of visionary minds who are not only driving technological advancement, but also embodying the personal journeys and insights that inspire us all. Each episode, we explore the intersections where human ingenuity meets the cutting edge of technology, unpacking the experiences, challenges, and triumphs that define our era. So, whether you're a tech enthusiast, an inspiring entrepreneur, or simply curious about the human narratives behind the digital revolution, you're in the right place. Welcome to The Human Code. I am here with Steve Cinelli, or Hey You, if you want to go by that as well. We're here to have an amazing conversation. And I got to say, we just did our pre-recording interview, and it's one of those things that we've got a great show in order for you today. I think that this conversation is going to go through a number of areas, and we'll probably find some common ground in a lot of spaces, but really, I'm excited to be talking with you today, Steve. And if you don't mind, just give us a little bit of background about what got you here today and what your experience in life has been so far.
Well, that's a loaded question. Just as a little background, I was born and raised in San Francisco, followed my father's footsteps into banking, had been a banker virtually all my career. And over the course of a number of years, I morphed from banking and private equity and the leveraged buyout business into looking at how technology can affect financial services. And so I founded a couple of companies that use technology in, I think, relatively innovative ways. First of all, a company by the name of Offroad Capital, which was the first of the platforms to aggregate investors online in a private market system to raise money through investors. And this crowdfunding was coined as a term back in probably about 2010. We did this in 2000. So we worked closely with the SEC, with the regulators who first said, no, you can't raise money online. We said, not only can we raise money online, we can actually improve the process, and we can establish best practices, and we can inform investors in a better and more comprehensive way by doing it virtually as opposed to in paper form. And it's much more efficient. Because as I shared, when bankers or companies go out and raise money, you tell the same story redundantly to dozens and dozens of folks. Using technology, using the internet, as I say, you can tell the story singularly to a plurality. So it's much more efficient in terms of moving information into the hands of potential investors. At the same time, you can track what they read, you can track what they see, where they need some assistance. And so it becomes more of a interactive type thing. And we had a TV studio. We allowed the investors to ask questions either in a live studio audience or virtually. And in certain respects, I characterize this thing as financial entertainment. And we could raise $10, $15 million for a company within a week. And this was all so-called accredited investors, the well-to-dos. It wasn't regulation, crowdfunding, where everybody can participate under the Jobs Act that was passed a number of years ago. We're sort of on the bleeding edge of creating online private capital market systems. And so I was co-founder. I was the banking guy. I had a technology partner and ran the banking group, and we expanded it domestically and moved it into the international markets and ended up selling it. But I became, again, as I said, fascinated with technology as applied to financial services, and have subsequently participated in writing books on technology and banking and so on. And banking, because banking or finance is really an information service, information business, it's most affected positively by the acceleration of information flows. And so it's one of the industries that really does change with technology. And certainly blockchain and distributed ledger technology is another area that will remake the financial service industry, which is great. I'm not a subscriber to cryptocurrency. I would agree with the Jamie Dimons and the Warren Buffetts that there's suspicion behind that, but we won't go into that. but I do believe blockchain technology and
And
some of
I,
the newer technologies will revolutionize or evolutionize financial services.
it is an absolutely fascinating space because blockchain and the general ledger type of capabilities that it provides can really, well, add efficiency, speed, reduce errors, and allow for I think just a rich experience around being able to manage your own money. But that industry has its own adoption challenges. Outside of the regulatory space, there's an entirely different way that you have to identify with the relationship you have with your money and
Hmm.
also with holding your own money. Because crypto is, you are your bank. You lose your wallet and you've lost all your money. There's no third party that
Hmm.
you can go out to. But we also have seen a significant explosion of Bitcoin adoption with the latest
Sure.
ETF that has come out. And I saw a report that basically every Bitcoin generated in the last 9 months is now in the Bitcoin ETF.
Hmm.
And so like the growth of that space is being consumed. And I can't remember the actual number, but there's just billions of dollars right now in there. One area that we were talking about earlier is artificial intelligence and financial services. I would love to get your an understanding of where you see one, where you probably have applied AI in financial services today, because like you said, technology adoption in the financial sector goes hand in hand. And then two, do you see like the path forward for the future of what AI can help individuals, companies, and investors with their financial services as well?
AI is, in my view, and this is probably simplistic, is really a database that can be accessed more rapidly and with some logic as opposed to older versions of databases. It can anticipate, it can iterate, it can do things quicker than the human mind can do, but it goes through the same exercise. It just does it at warp speed. And so anything that is inquisitive can be benefited by AI if you're doing research. Rather than going through the web or going to the library, this and that, you can do that research in a matter of moments, seconds and minutes, as opposed to weeks and months. And so in that respect, it's a more efficient flow and a catered flow or a curated flow of information that will benefit. So anything that's research driven, trying to assess risk profiles of loan portfolios or trying to personalize a financial program for an individual or a company or whatever, you can do that much more rapidly than you could in the past, because it was more of almost an analog environment versus a digital. You're going from analog to digital to quantum. I would facetiously use it quantum, but you can expedite things, and timing. Time is money, as they say, and money is time. Some of the stuff, and you had mentioned crypto, and I have a difficulty with that because I don't think it really defines what money is, or money as a definition. Crypto doesn't satisfy. Yes, it's a unit of account. Yes, it's a store of value, but is it really transactable? I mean, my view is that I gave a talk down in the Silicon Valley on crypto and blockchain. And while I subscribe to the blockchain applications, I said, crypto is for someone who's been in trade finance. It's if I was selling a product for $100 down to Venezuela and I was expecting to receive $100 in value, but in Bolivar, their local currency, if I wait too long, the Bolivar goes from $100 of equivalent value down to $32 because of the volatility. And so that, for me, I'm not in a position, I'm trying to sell a product and capture the margin I anticipate. But if I'm only going to get cents on the dollar because currency or the transaction exposure or the translation exposure, that becomes a problem. And that's where I don't think Bitcoin or any of these volatile cryptos really satisfy the definition of money, because you can't transact. You don't, what was it years ago when some of the early Bitcoin aficionados bought a pizza? And now this pizza is recognized to be the most expensive pizza ever, like $10,000 because of that's silliness in my view. And
Because it makes it hard to actually transact when you don't understand what the
yeah, and you
underlying
made a
will
good
be.
point, is the intermediation is cryptocurrencies, which are peer-to-peer plays are generally peer-to-peer plays. There is some intermediation because whether it's Coinbase, whether it's Bittrex or whoever, so there's some intermediation. The other thing too is that people talk about the speed of transaction processing. Think about you going into a restaurant or a bar or some retailer and you use your credit card. That transaction's processed immediately. So
Yes.
how much are you going from seconds to fractions of seconds? Is that meaningful in the equation? The general belief of these cryptos is that you're cutting out the middleman, you're cutting out costs, and you're making them quicker. How much more quick do you need to settle something that's going to settle within the day or within minutes? So the propositions that have been thrown out there, I tend to question because I've been on the banking side, I've been on the economic side, the financial service side. And again, simply, I don't think the Bitcoins and the Ethers represent, a true definition of money. Then you have things like XRP, through Ripple, but XRP is not really in my view, a stable coin or a crypto. It's, Ripple's really a payment gateway. So what they're trying to do is replace Swift. They're trying to replace payment rails. So they've got a different proposition than some of the other things. So anyway, I'm suspect of the benefits and there's, the benefits of crypto, like that Bitcoin, particularly because what's the underlying value? We can say Yellen and Powell in DC are printing money. Is there any underlying value? You still have the ability of the United States to generate tax revenues. So there's some credit and there's assets on the balance sheet and so on and so forth. There's nothing that underscore most of these cryptos.
My favorite barroom conversation about crypto was with a violinist for the Philadelphia Orchestra. And I see your Bitcoin. And he goes, but you know what my US dollars have that your Bitcoin doesn't have? And I was like, what? And he goes, an army.
Good.
And it's like, okay, yeah, no, the army is actually, or the military is defending the value of the United States dollar as well as like the country. And I think that's along the lines of your point here is there's not an infrastructure behind it that is really protecting that value or ensuring that it like stays with it. Plus, or doing things with the infrastructure of it that would definitely benefit the population, which you could also say encounter is that like the Bitcoin community is providing that capability, but it's still not a general responsibility. It's more of an emergent responsibility that comes to the
But
to
you
the
have
community.
that the US dollar or any sovereign currency, you have the ability of that country who's issuing those notes, their ability to generate revenues. In the US, it's tax driven. There's a number of countries that don't assess taxes. They have other means of revenue. For example, I just got back from Saudi Arabia on a delegation, and the Saudis have, of course, oil. And through their Aramco, they generate billions and billions of dollars of revenues. And they're doing just an absolute marvelous job of positioning and futurizing their country in terms of their technology investments. They want to diversify away from fossil fuels. They're making big investments in space and material science and genomics and in financial services and hospitality. And they're really trying to create a multiplicity economy, which I give them nothing but credit. And they've got a young population. About 40% of their population is, I believe, millennials and younger. And so they're building a big consumer market because of the demographics. They're well positioned and investing in, and they're partnering with, US companies, European companies, all sorts of companies. And I was just so impressed with their vision. The counterpoint to that is, this is another topic we can go off on. We advocate for democracy and a democratic system and let the people elect folks. That becomes a problem because we change the guard in our country every 2, 4, and 6 years, the Congress, the presidency, and the Senate. And so can you really do a long-term plan because of the changing of the guard and because of the changing of the philosophies and the changing of the ideologies? Whereas over in Saudi, you've got one guy in charge. You got the prince. And so he can make decisions and people get things done. And so it's an interesting dichotomy to look at an autocratic environment and what you can do because you don't have this bickering back and forth, but we espouse as democracy and people rule, and there's no requirement for knowledge in terms of voting. You do not have to know the issues. You don't need to know the personalities. You're basically making decisions now based on social media and influencers.
It's all in 5-second clips
sure.
and emotional kind of thing, right? Yeah. It is amazing. And Saudi Arabia is able to make significant investments. And I stand with you that I will say outside of the humanitarian side,
Sure.
the human rights approach, they've done some really good things with their economy, especially what you highlighted, becoming a financial services center, investing in material science, genomics. They're also doing, the Line and Neom well, which is looking to be either a $500 billion or $1 trillion investment. And whether that is successful or not, there's going to be amazing learnings that come from that will help to shore that.
Which one of the problems is when you compare, say, the United States with Saudi, is we spend much more money per student in education, except our performance, we rank down about 125th in terms of education. If you compare with all the OECD countries, what poverty rate is, if we're using the same characteristics and the same metrics, we actually have the highest poverty rate in the United States compared to every place else in the world. We changed the definition to fit our narrative, or the narrative that the U.S. wants to pursue. But if you go and look at the OECD, you'll find that our poverty rate is much, much higher. We spend more. We have the biggest economy out there, but the efficiency, the efficacy of how we spend it, we've got one of the highest levels of illiteracy in the under 6th grade. It's amazing on how much money we spend, but it's not spent for the right reasons. And then just recently, which goes to my little commentary on public sector spending, is if you look at the financial statements, again, I'm a banker, so I read financial statements. If you look at the financial statements of the U.S. government, which is published, I think, in the September of every year, is that there's literally hundreds of billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars of transactions going unaccounted for. They don't have matching transactions. This is money that folks don't know where. Normally you have a debit and a credit, and they come together, and this is the pot of money this was used. And it's absolutely amazing that the government, the govies, as I call them, don't. Let me take a step back. I think it was 5 or 6 of the cabinet offices, defense, education, healthy human services. They got what was considered a qualified audit opinion, meaning that the accountants, the auditors wouldn't give a blessing to the numbers were decent. And it's amazing. Yeah. And then of course you've got the govies continue to go back, and now Biden wants another $8 trillion for the next budget. They aren't entitled to ask for more until they reconcile what they spent in the past. And no one's holding them to account. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
I have a lot of opinions in this area.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to get your take on, how do we address this? Is it a super AI intelligence that we all just bow down to? My personal take is we got to change how we vote, but that I feel the system of how we hold politicians accountable needs to change. Where do you see this going?
I pose this question to you: is that, would you feel better with someone that everybody, even without appropriate background or research, voted for someone in a position of power? Or would you, much like in the private sector, put together a great search committee and find the best and the brightest and install someone as a CEO to really operate the thing and run this thing as it should, as opposed to a bunch of democracy is synonymous with ochlocracy, which is mob rule. Yeah. There's no requirement that you have to be knowledgeable about the topics you vote on. And so you have decision making and passing the power to people that
Well, I think
really are,
that's,
that may not be.
yeah. And I'll dive into this and I'll say, I don't think we're purely a democracy, right? Like we have a representative democracy that
Mhm.
hopefully these people are knowledgeable about what they're voting on. My challenge with it today is that a two-party system ends up devolving into a pointing of
Mhm.
fingers, right? And in order to make your tent large enough to hold the population of people you need to get first past the polls, right? And to win the plurality of votes for that, you have to make your platform appetizing to everybody that's there, except that's not really how the world works. You can't get something that's going to satisfy the progressives and the centralists or on the right and the far. Like we're not going to see a platform that kind of meets everybody's needs. And so what we've seen is basically we have one side going, I'm not that guy. The other side going, I'm not that guy. And then the news and the social media and everything that's getting pushed out or in people's faces is leaning towards one side or the other that allows you then to also say, I'm not that person, or that person is much worse than what we
Mhm.
are. And we're getting different amounts of information or different pieces. And the space that I find difficult with that is if you're campaigning that you're not this person, then when you get in office, any accomplishment that you have is still just because you're
Sure.
not that person. Whereas we look at like how ranked
Mhm.
choice voting, where you could actually vote for a third party candidate and not
Mhm.
lose your vote. And so like ranked choice voting are you familiar with it? Okay, cool. So what's happened in Maine is the results have been really positive around how people are
Mhm.
campaigning. The negative campaigns have dropped significantly. In fact, I think the first time through out of 5 candidates, there was one person who tried to create a negative campaign, but they had to do it against
Yeah.
4 different people. And so it didn't really hold weight and it didn't
Mhm.
really elevate that person. And then you had, let's say, 2 Democratic candidates. They would team up, say, hey, vote for me one, vote for this person second, or vice versa. And they were able to actually promote third party candidates as well. But because people weren't going for the negative side, they actually had to campaign on what they were going to do. So 2 years later, you could turn around and say, hey, is this guy full of shit? Or did he actually at least try and move forward
Sure.
an agenda? And I think that could be something that hopefully in some other areas we'll adopt it and it could break free of this whole right side, left side space. Because a lot of us probably don't identify solely with one party or the
Yeah.
entire
The other thing
ideals of
too that
that.
is interesting is that we tend to advocate for capitalism and free markets and again, broad capitalism. But if you look at China compared to the US, our government actually contributes more to the overall economy from a GDP standpoint than the Chinese government contributes to their economy. And there's, you can look at the narratives that are out there that are really, if you do a little homework, they're unfounded. And I question whether or not we're truly a democracy. I certainly question the continued emphasis on having the government really control things. We're writing, I belong to a think tank back in New York, and we're putting together a paper on what industrial policy should be in 2030 for the United States. And with the exception of the CHIPS Act, which is the semiconductor thing that Biden administration introduced, the U.S. hasn't had an industrial policy for many years. That is, does
Yeah.
the government intercession into the economy from a positive standpoint really isn't positive. It's really to bail things out. It bailed out the automotive industry when they had a problem back in 2008, 2010. It bailed out banks because they were having a problem with mortgages. And you've got the Biden administration pumping tremendous amounts of resources into the green economy or this climate thing. And now people are wondering, particularly the automotive companies who are saying EVs, they're really not the proposition we thought they were to begin with. In fact, they cause a bigger carbon footprint because of how they're manufactured. There's problems. We don't have the electrical grid to support what the govies want. And again, it's peeling back the narratives to what actually is the true things. And then, of course, you can go into the whole COVID thing and vaccines and keeping kids out of school. And will anybody be held accountable for decisions that were obviously wrong and actually set us back quite a bit?
I know a number of people who are going through significant career change now based on whether it's AI in the technology sector or it's that they're graduating college. I sit on the board of a coaching company that focuses on on that population. Given that you're looking at what we should do for 5-10 years from now, what advice do you have to anybody who's like looking at change in their career, in their life, in their investments?
Yeah, technology is going to change a lot of things. One of the things that, I gave a little talk to one of the big accounting firms a little while back, and AI actually, with this LLM and the generatives AI and so on and so forth, I actually think the jobs that historically were more the intellectual jobs, the bankers, the attorneys, the consultants, those are the accountants. Those are the areas that are going to be most affected. Because if you think about the accounting profession, is that if you're using something like distributed ledger technology and blockchain, where every transaction is immutable, it's registered, what's the need for an audit? Because it's constantly audited. That changes that business. When an attorney is doing a case law review for a particular case, rather than going through tomes and tomes, you can do it all through one of the AI platforms and do all that work. And so all of a sudden it reduces the research time and probably comes up with a solution much better than the attorney themselves. And so a lot of these professions, these white collar professions, I think those are the ones that are really going to be affected the most, because you don't have to pay $1,500 an hour to an attorney anymore. You can get the response in a matter of minutes through one of the programs. So that's a big difference. I think the area that may survive, even though technology does play a role, is the creative segment, the creator economy. Is it the ingenuity of the human psyche and the thought process? Yeah, you can replicate, you can enhance creative products from writing to, Sora. Now you can take text and move it into video, which is interesting because I haven't done it yet. But as I mentioned, I wrote a children's book some time ago, all in the verse of Dr. Seuss. So it's a unique poetic meter. And I want to insert that to see how it changes or animates the book. So that could be a fun thing to do. But I think that the creative economy, the creator economy, I should say, is going to hopefully stay there. My son he's got a stop action animation studio. And what he does, I can't see AI taking over for that. Certainly entertainment industry is concerned with AI, with images and so on and so forth. But there's certain things that I think the personalization or the uniqueness of the creative mind, hopefully, and I underscore hopefully, will stay intact and not be replaced or replicated or duplicated by some computer program.
I'm hopeful as well. I see that I'm basically dedicating my time in my life right now to bringing these solutions to fruition. But we always look at it from the standpoint of like, how can we enhance the human experience inside of this? And mostly only work with businesses that are relationship focused, that are looking to provide an enhanced experience for themselves, their customers, and their team.
We have to,
and so hopefully we can move that forward.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that human interaction has to be emphasized now, because I was at a dinner a couple years ago, and just a quiet dinner, and the table next to us, family of 5 got to the table. And as soon as they all sat down, they all pulled their mobile device up and started texting. They didn't have a conversation. They just started texting on their own, mom, dad, and the 3 kids. Yeah. And I turned around and said, why don't you guys have a family conversation? And they were all embarrassed. And and you look at the behavior pattern, is that you talk about broken relationships. You're talking about all this, people communicate on this electronic device, even though you're right across the table from someone, that's a problem. And you can use technology to be smarter and faster and quicker and so on and so forth, but don't over impersonalize relationships. There's nothing better than spending time with family and loved ones on it. Do yourself a favor, and phones, mobile devices don't come to the dinner table. Mobile devices don't come to certain sessions. You put it to the side.
I absolutely love that advice. I know I'm just looking at the clock, and I got to say, I've had a really pleasant time speaking with you today.
Oh, likewise.
So thank you very much for joining us. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience about what you have going on, or any inspiration to lay at our feet?
I'll make one comment is that one of the projects that I'm involved in is looking at the various use cases for industrial hemp. Hemp being a strain of the cannabis plant, but it's the non-psychoactive strain. And I became fascinated with it a couple of years ago because I saw all the different use cases, from textiles to food to skincare and whatnot. But then I saw that you can actually use the fibers on the carbonized fashion for batteries to replace existing battery technology. You can use it for low-powered semiconductors, building materials. It's more insulative than concrete. Concrete, of course, requires a lot of fossil fuel to make. You can use hemp fiber and hurd and lime to create basically adobe blocks, which perform exceedingly well. In fact, the building regulatory agencies in the United States now allow for hempcrete to be used. And so our project right now is actually to build out a series of campuses that would host companies that utilize hemp and other plant-based materials in lieu of toxic materials such as petroleum-based things, even like in the automotive and aviation industries, transportation industries. So we're excited about that proposition, and we're becoming big hemp advocates as well as plant-based, because we have to do something to stop the pollution. 12% of landfills are clothes, because if you think about what you're wearing, 80% of the fibers that makes those clothes is acrylic, polyester, and nylon, all of which are petroleum-based, so they don't biodegrade. That's a problem. You think about things as simple as diapers. Diapers, you can make most of it biodegradable, but the absorbent layer is a polymer that's petroleum-based, and it doesn't biodegrade. You see these pictures of diapers in landfills. That's a problem. So looking at ways to improve the material to where it becomes almost one of the buzz terms is a circular economy. You take it out of the ground and it can actually return to the ground on a healthy basis. And so it's a big project, and we've got a lot of good partnerships in place, and that's where you'll see me doing some stuff over the next couple of years.
I love it. Is there any place that we can find out more about that project?
Yeah, our website is renaissanceparkcorp.com. And it gives a little profile, but it's pretty generic. But if you have folks that are interested in learning about not only hemp, but what we're doing and how we're approaching this, you can certainly put them in touch with me and my team and stuff like this, and I'd love to talk about it. I'm constantly amazed at this plant that's been around for thousands and thousands of years, which was rolled under the bus by corporate interests in the 1920s, just recently had a renaissance, namely a rebirth, where it became legal. Industrial hemp became legal in 2018. And then, Europe's 10 years ahead of us in the development and the usage of hemp for even the high-speed rail line in France. The SNCF is using hemp as paneling because you can fabricate the hemp in terms of 10 times stronger than steel, but much lighter. So the characteristics and the feature sets are just absolutely amazing. So as I say, we're limited to our own imagination is what you can do with this stuff. And it's all climate friendly.
Oh my God, fantastic.
It absorbs carbon. It sucks up CO2. It's a magical plant. And so that and other things that we're looking at in terms of plants that can displace or replace toxic materials, that's really the big agenda.
I love it. Steve, again, thank you for sharing yourself.
Sure.
This has been inspiring. I think we can all look at how we can apply what we do today to the circular economy. And there is something about knowing that what you build today is going to end up in the ground tomorrow. And whether it's software, whether it's
Hmm.
hardware, whether it's something physical, whether it's the clothing, like we have to create an understanding as far as how we contribute and how we actually like allow this world to
Absolutely.
continue on.
Absolutely. And then we can have the continued conversation about AI and religion. I'd love to continue that.
So yeah, you know what? I'm actually going to put this in the recording because Steve, we are going to have you back so that we can
That'd be
continue that
fun.
conversation. I would love to dive into AI, religion, and like where we
Yeah.
actually see
Super.
all that going. Awesome. Thank you for tuning into The Human Code, sponsored by Findustries, where we harness AI to elevate your business. By improving operational efficiency and accelerating growth, we turn opportunities into reality. Let Findustries be your guide to AI mastery, making success inevitable. Explore how at findustries.co.